Peace and Anarchy, Episode 3.
Could it all be a bad dream or a nightmare? Is it my imagination, or have we lost our minds?
If you got a business, that you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
I've abandoned free market principles to save the free market system.
Violence and lost liberty will result without some revolutionary thinking. We must escape from the madness of crowds now gathering.
Welcome to Peace and Anarchy, episode number 3. Thanks for joining us here again. I'm Ryan Griggs, one of your co-hosts, along with
Tabor, your other co-host.
And this episode is going to be a bit more like what we'll normally have available for you on a Sunday. So if you've been with us for our full launch day, this Sunday, January 17th, then you've already listened to episode 1, tells you a little bit about Tabor and myself and where our name came from. You've also heard episode 2, which was a very full and
a State of the Union extravaganza.
A full breakdown of His Highness's State of the Union. In this episode, we're going to get more into our content. First, we're going to talk about the phenomenon of Donald Trump, which I'm on written record about already. I don't know, Tabor, have you discussed the Don anywhere?
Not publicly, but I'm about to make my statements.
Very good, very good. So after the Don, and we'll talk some about the recent debates. Of course, the Iowa caucus is coming up at the beginning of February. New Hampshire shortly after that. Then we're going to get into refuting the pink tax. And I'll let that hang there. Well, Tabor will be happy to explain
We'll leave it with an air of mystery.
There you go. And well, then I'm going to get into the first Peace and Anarchy book review. You have to work with me here. I don't review books often, but I read plenty. And this book in particular is very salient and very important, especially with regard to this show and where we come from. The author is going to combine some of Ayn Rand's ideas with those of Murray Rothbard, and the product is very nice, I think. We'll see what you think.
And finally, we're going to end with an upbeat fantasy notion of winning the lottery.
Yes, the very popular nowadays is, or at least this week, has been the Powerball. So let's get right into it, Tabor. Donald Trump. Now, did you watch the debate, or?
I did not.
Okay.
So,
bit of a circus.
I've been good this year, I'll say, and I've been limiting my political exposure just because I live with some roommates. Mm-hmm. And they're not particularly fond of me yelling at the television because they want to hear what's going on.
Well, typical of Trump, according to the Drudge poll, the Time poll, anywhere there's an online poll after these debates, Trump just kills everyone.
Well, he does have the strongest personality of any of them.
He does.
For all of his crazy antics, he comes off as the most... He's the easiest one to listen to of them, honestly, because...
Definitely.
Because Ted Cruz sounds like a nasal scarecrow.
It's bad. It's really bad.
And Marco Rubio sounds like a really young kid who's just nervous about being on stage and he has no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, I just want to give him a cookie. Like, have a snack. Sit down, young man. It's very strange. The whole bunch is a bad group. I mean, Chris, the blubbering Christie, is awful. Kasich and his little neurotic fidgeting is insane.
And then one of the distinguished Johns Hopkins members, Dr. Ben Carson, I've heard he's quite lethargic.
Oh, God. If you can stay awake and listen to him at the same time.
Which is surprising. So when I was at Hopkins, I was part of a group that invited him to speak on campus. He did not have the same speaking style as he does here. He was incredibly animated because he kept walking back and forth across the stage. Made it really difficult for me to film the whole thing. Because it was just, slow down, mister.
So he does have some life force.
Some. Huh. But of course, in that same speech, he also said that we wouldn't be able to afford electricity and we wouldn't have toilets if it weren't for the government providing them for us. So honestly, I don't understand why any Republican would support him.
Jeez. Well, they're certainly all turning to Trump, and Trump has been, especially in libertarian, liberty-oriented circles, quite the thorny subject. If you come too close to endorsing the man, you will be facing the wrath of the libertarian minions across the internet. Now, I'm actually all for what I call libertarian nitpicking. That is, when libertarians challenge each other. I think that's great.
Well, that's how we grow.
It's exactly. Another topic for another time, but it is true to say that if you come close to supporting Trump, you do face the wrath of the internet libertarians.
Well, and really a lot of that wrath comes from people that think that you're endorsing him.
Right.
Which I don't think, a lot of the wrath comes down on Lew Rockwell. Has Lew Rockwell endorsed Donald Trump? And no, clearly he hasn't. Neither he nor Tom Woods wants
Right.
Donald Trump to be president. They don't want anyone to be president. We don't want anyone to be president. It really comes down to who's the entertainment factor.
True.
And who actually said stuff that's worthy of being dissected.
True. For example, I wrote on Donald Trump in July of last year. Wow, July 22nd. 3 days before my birthday. Hint, hint, everyone. You know where to send gifts now this July.
It's a little far in advance.
Anyway, I wrote way back at the beginning of his campaign, and I stand by it now. I wrote, in part, Trump is a mental break from reality. His idiotic ideas about how to make America great again have nothing to do with human prosperity. But it's fun to watch. his bombastic nature and his willingness to say whatever comes across his dull mind.
In the early seasons of The Apprentice, when it was more normal, it wasn't The Celebrity Apprentice, I was a huge fan of the show. It was great entertainment to watch, and honestly, he had some great business sense in it. I mean...
Well, surely he does. And, Lou makes this point. He says, there's never been an independently wealthy dictator ever. Period. And... hey, I'll take those odds. If somebody is going to be president, as sad as that is, maybe it should be somebody who, by his character, by his traits, may not kill legions of people.
Well, and I have to say, for all of the people who, quote, want to get money out of politics, if there's anyone they should be supporting, it should be Donald Trump. He's the only one who's independently wealthy enough to fund his own campaign without asking his minions, the plebeians who work for a pittance, wage slaves, to support him.
Yeah,
because when you look at Hillary's and Bernie Sanders, our friend over there,
oh my,
what was he doing? He wasn't paying his interns minimum wage, but he's the one who's calling for minimum wage. Yeah. So Donald Trump's the only one who could actually pull this off. And I think another thing that appeals about Donald Trump to many people is that he's an outsider to the political realm. He's not an outsider to the American persona. But he
arguably he is the American persona for a lot of people.
Right, but he was not ever elected. Now, I do have some experience with Donald Trump in person.
Really?
I was at CPAC back when Ron Paul was running, and this was, I believe, the 2011 CPAC.
All right.
And that was the second year that he won. And so the first year that we were there and won was in 2010. And none of us that swarmed the conference actually believed that we were going to win that straw poll. So when it came time for the announcement, none of us wanted to stay. We were like, whatever. We don't want to listen to Glenn Beck or Sarah Palin or whoever their guest speaker of the last evening was.
Right.
So we all left. And what happened was there was a group of neocons left in the audience that booed when Ron Paul won. So this next year, we weren't going to let that happen. And this was also the year that Rand spoke at CPAC for the first time. And, Rand was new on the political scene. We didn't know quite what he was going to turn out to be, so a bunch of us kept him on our lists of people to watch, and we were going to protect him from the political hecklers of the neocons. Now, I'm sure we'll have a whole episode devoted to the errors of Rand.
Oh, yeah, we must.
Both Rands, right? Ayn Rand and Rand
true.
Paul. Even though their names are not etymologically linked.
Right.
So there's a bunch of us Ron Paulians in the audience, and Donald Trump decided that he wanted to perhaps dip his toe in the political ring. And CPAC is quite fond of doing this interrupted speech method or special guests where it's like, oh, unannounced guest speaker.
During another speech?
Not during another speech, but right before it.
Huh. Oh, like a surprise.
Like a surprise guest speaker that wasn't on the schedule. So,
okay.
Basic word to the wise, if you ever go to CPAC, don't believe the schedule. They will not hold to it.
All right.
So Donald Trump decides he's going to enter the Senate, and so he was one of these special unannounced guests. Now, whose speech did he come in right before? None other than Rand Paul himself.
Oh, really?
And so the audience, we're all expecting Rand Paul to come out. Donald Trump comes out, and, you know, he's facing a hostile audience.
Uh-huh.
And he's talking about his whole Make America Great Again, and he says, I don't see a single candidate out there who would actually perform the change that we need to see. And this is when the great moment happened. One of the Ron Paul people yelled out, "What about Ron Paul?"
Excellent.
And I was doing photography for Young Americans for Liberty that event, so I was in the press section. So I have some great pictures of Donald Trump, beet red, arms flapping, mouth open. Ron Paul is not electable.
Well,
which derailed his entire speech. But his entering the political realm isn't news to those of us that were in the D.C. area during the 2012
probably had some
campaign.
political ambition for some time.
Right.
And it's paying off. I mean, I'm looking at the Reuters rolling poll as of, let's see, we're recording here on Saturday night, the 16th of January, and Donald Trump is at 40.7%. Next up, Ted Cruz at 16%. 1/6. I mean, so he's absolutely flattening the rest of the field. He's pissing plenty of people off, which I enjoy. When the New York Times has to publish articles with the headline "Donald Trump and White Nationalists," I'm kind of sympathetic. If you
you gotta love how the Huffington Post decided to cover him in the entertainment section.
Oh, right.
Which just ensures that more people will see it.
Yeah, boy, they ate it over that. And apparently, well, not apparently, obviously, Trump's barbs have a lot of effectiveness. So in this most recent debate, he accused Ted Cruz of possibly being ineligible to run for the president of the United States because he was born in Canada. And a poll shortly after had a quarter of Republicans agreeing about, or at least...
Well, I have to say, he does have an interesting point on this.
Uh-huh.
Not because I think Ted Cruz is ineligible. I know Tom Woods has recently brought up some court cases that I haven't read yet, but I intend to. But the interesting thing is that whole notion of citizenship would also ban McCain from becoming president, too, because he was born in Panama.
Huh.
So, the
say they're
minds
all
of the
ineligible.
Republicans.
Yeah, how about they're all ineligible? Nobody can run for office. But sadly, that's not the world we face. We do have a current president, Obama, and according to Time, Time, the website, not Time Magazine, but President Obama doesn't understand the quote-unquote tampon tax. What the hell is this?
So the latest outrage in the Huffington Post, Jezebel, Salon world of things is this pink tax. And so it's the notion that women...
Pink, like the color.
The color pink. So pink products, or products sold for women, tend to be more expensive than what they consider to be an equivalent for men. So the example that continually gets brought up are women's disposable razors. So women's razors are pink, men's razors are blue. Women's razors cost more.
Must be the color.
Totally, right? So, extending that further, a bunch of feminists have found outrage that women's items in general tend to cost more when they're marketed to women specifically. Like, there was the tricycle that when it was pink, it cost $10 more than the other. Women's shirts cost more to dry clean than men's shirts. And then Obama's misunderstanding of the, quote, tampon tax. Women obviously have menstrual products that they have to purchase. So that's the idea behind the pink tax, is that women are taxed because they are women.
Yeah, so the market's out to get the women.
Right.
And
never mind the fact that women have different preferences than men. And I think this is
Right.
This should be an uncontroversial statement. I say should because it will generate some controversy. But women and men have different preferences. Individuals have different preferences. I do not have the same preferences of every other woman on this planet. And I think it would be a little weird if we all did.
Yeah. What
we find is that in the case of clothing, hygienic products, women care more about these things. And in their list of subjective values, they rank higher than other products. And therefore, they're willing to pay more for them, for that quality, for the scent, for the color, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
The reason doesn't really matter. What matters is the ranking. So when we look at strict Austrian analysis of economic exchanges, it doesn't matter why the action took place. Like if I was to throw this microphone across the room, it doesn't matter why I did it. The only thing that we can really analyze is
it happened.
It happened. And so when we look at these things like the pink tax, we can see, oh, well, regardless of whatever you said, you still bought that product.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention there's no law saying that women have to buy the pink product.
Right. It's their choice.
And there's no law saying men can't buy the pink product either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll embarrass my dad on a podcast.
Oh, good. He'll love this.
Oh, totally. No, he shouldn't be embarrassed about this one too much. I happen to know that he preferred to buy the pink razors. Because there is a major difference between the pink razors and the blue razors.
More gentle on your skin?
There's a lotion strip.
Okay.
And
That's what he likes. Okay.
He preferred to buy the women's razor because it had that lotion strip.
Sure.
So there are differences, and there are always differences across products. The notion of perfect competition, I'm sure we'll get to.
Oh yeah, well
later.
I'm glad.
But there's always product differentiation, and there's always individual psychological reasons why people prefer one thing to another. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with having a preference, and preferences is just how we determine prices.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
I wanted to get to that, this notion of where prices come from. This whole argument about this, menstrual supplies costing so much. I mean, it's a discussion over prices, right? And it's interesting that the state bureaucrats and the state functionaries, they can't get their economic theory of pricing straight. Either prices are from the costs of production, namely something is only worth whatever it costs to make it, which is wrong-headed. Otherwise, why would a computer that cost $1,000 to make but doesn't work, sells for nothing? Can't explain that phenomenon with the cost of production theory. But now we want to introduce what you might call a discrimination pricing theory, that prices are what they are because of some arbitrary whim that the seller or entrepreneur has.
The patriarchy is against women and wants to force them to buy tampons. Right. Now, wasn't there that whole free bleeding thing that the feminists were going on for a while? Like, stop buying tampons, period?
Oh, and this is a good tie-in with Trump. Some feminist activist used her menstrual blood to paint Trump's picture. I mean, these people are sick. They're insane.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, she did it with her own menstrual blood, so, to each their own.
Yeah.
But,
Keep it to yourself.
We can still judge.
Yeah. All right, so that's the pink tax. If you hear...
I will definitely be linking to a bunch of different articles particularly in the time.com link. Obama states that it must have been men that made that law, which, well, true, it's wrong-headed to blame the patriarchy for the fact that women want to buy certain products over others.
Yeah, and one point before we move on from this, this is the modus operandi, the MO for state mouthpieces like His Highness Obama. He wants to encourage the divisiveness, right?
It's divide and conquer.
Right.
Where feminists are focused on attacking men when they should be focused on attacking the entity that is truly oppressing everybody. Right? They want to remove the tampon tax, but the real answer is to remove taxes, period.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that's talked about in the book that we're reviewing this week.
Yes. Written by J. Michael Oliver. It's called The New Libertarianism, anarcho-capitalism. So we've mentioned the term anarcho-capitalism on the show before. I don't think we've fully gone through it. So before I talk too much about the book, let's review just what we mean when we say anarcho-capitalism. First of all, the term we use today is mostly from Murray Rothbard. There's some discussion about who actually came up with it first. It may not have been him. But the concept itself describes... well, first, it applies politically. So it's a political philosophy, right? Let's break the word up into its two portions. Anarcho, right? This relates back to anarchy, which I think in episode 1 you discussed means without rulers, right?
Right. It does not mean without rules. It does not mean without chaos. It means...
the absence of institutionalized coercion is what it refers to. The absence of a government. The second part of the term... capitalism refers to what capitalism has meant for hundreds of years, and not what the people in universities and the ivory tower would like it to mean today. Capitalism describes a system of voluntary exchange. Period. That's all you need. So,
well, and really, the term anarchy implies capitalism,
right.
and the term capitalism implies anarchy. You can't have a true capitalist system if you have a government in place, because no matter what the government will do, it will create moral hazard and affect market signals.
Right. So, like I said, anarcho-capitalism is in our political lexicon mainly because of Murray Rothbard. Now, counter Murray Rothbard is another libertarian heavyweight who's inspired many people, myself included, and still to this day. And that's Ayn Rand, A-Y-N, and then Rand. Like you said earlier, her name was not the inspiration for Randall Paul. No relationship there. But there's always been a friction between followers of Ayn Rand who...
the objectivists.
Right, they refer to themselves as objectivists. Objectivism is her body of philosophy that she put forth in her novels. And because of some personal conflicts, and I would characterize them as sort of petty conflicts, between Rand and Rothbard and others in their respective circles, there's been a division between those who follow objectivism and those who subscribe to anarcho-capitalism. Enter this book. It's a very short book. I have the Kindle version. Couldn't tell you page length, but it took me maybe 5 hours to read. Not long at all. There are portions you'd want to go back and read again, and I'd recommend it. So what Oliver does in this book, he builds up the philosophical system of objectivism. He quotes Rand and Nathaniel Branden, who was sort of her protege, throughout as he builds up, what is metaphysics? What is epistemology? How does volition, this notion that human beings have free will and can choose, how does that factor in? What's the role of ethics? And this builds up and up until we reach our reality today, in which human beings are interacting with one another. And that his discussion of objectivism then informs the politics.
So I'm curious.
Sure.
How is he able to reconcile the objectivists' notion that the prices are objective, values are objective, with the Austrian notion of subjective value?
So he strips away and defines very closely what objectivism means and how that relates to the world. You won't find in this book, at least, anything that says that prices are objective, or that there are objective functions in the world that facilitate exchange. There's none of that. He means it in a much more metaphysical sense, and I think Rand did too. If you really scratched her hard enough, she would get to this level. That there is, in fact, an objective reality. There is a world in which individuals populate, all right? And this means, in fact, I have a quotation here. Let's see. He says, with regard to metaphysics, that since the external world exists independently, it is the object of consciousness, as discovered by consciousness, rather than the subject of consciousness. The name objectivism is derived, of course, from this metaphysical concept. So the core of objectivism itself, it doesn't have to do with stating, like what you said, that prices are objective. Now, that may
I think in application, that's how it ended up, was that...
True. No, I would totally agree.
Objectivists have pushed this whole notion that prices are objective.
I would totally agree.
And the notion that trade is equal, which we as Austrians discuss as trade being mutually unequal and mutually beneficial to each party.
Mm-hmm. And in the book, Oliver, he makes a point to cut away some of Rand's public statements. I'm referring here not much so to economics, but more so to her affinity for minarchy. She has stated publicly her support for government provision of police and courts and national defense and this sort of thing. But if you read her books, Atlas Shrugged in particular, you see little to none of any sort of scent or flavor of minarchy. It's much more an appreciation.
There's a private arbitration system in Atlantis,
right?
But there is no government in Atlantis.
Right.
But Ayn Rand publicly was very much pro-government in a limited scope. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that's feasible or not is to be discussed later.
Right.
But that there was that divide between her and Rothbard because she just couldn't make him see the need for a government.
Right. And I think that's part of why work like this particular book is necessary, because I think Rand is right on so much, and she was so integral into my own intellectual development. I mean, reading Atlas Shrugged, I don't want to say radicalized me, but I mean, it really did channel my creative and academic energy into, Rothbard, into the Mises Institute, it opened up a whole new world for me. It really did. So I don't think it's necessary to subscribe to those statements that would conflict. It's good to cut them out. She was right in some instances and wrong in others, and I think
so. This is really trying to mesh the two camps together and taking what the author sees as what one system got right as opposed to the other,
right?
And mixing them together in order to create harmony between the groups.
It's a real reconciliation. And in the conclusion, just to give you a bit of a preview, he says that anarcho-capitalism and its necessary objectivist premises, placed now properly in combination, rejects the subjectivism that undergirds both past and contemporary philosophical and political trends. So, important to note here, he's not rejecting subjectivism in economics. In economics, in fact, he doesn't much encounter that. He talks much more of the politics. But objectivism with respect to philosophy and political philosophy, I think, is true. And anarcho-capitalism, the science of liberty, the ethics of liberty. Rothbard was one of these people who thought that there was such a thing as objective ethics. And that's the bridge, that's the link between Randian and Rothbardian thought. And the author, I think, in here fleshes that out. He says at the end, anarcho-capitalism is but the political aspect of the broader objectivist philosophical revolution.
So this definitely sounds like a book our listeners should check out.
Yeah, good. And by the way, we're not being paid for any of this crap. So this is not a promotional thing. It's really a good book. I think you'd benefit from reading it. It is short, and so it does allow you to come away with a brief, concise, precise defense of the full body of libertarian political philosophy.
So we'll be providing links for the book on our show notes page.
Sure.
As well as we'd like to mention to our audience that we are accepting suggestions for book reviews. If you go to our website and click on the suggested topic, feel free to tell us what book you'd like to have us review. And it doesn't even have to be new. We're more than willing to go back and reread some of the classics and give you our take on them.
Could be something we've already read, even.
There's no harm in going back and rereading Man, Economy, and State or Human Action.
This is true. Well, on to more contemporary topics. We can take ourselves out of the political philosophy realm and talk about what's been in the news recently, namely the Powerball.
It's the lottery. The odds of winning anything at all, I should say, is probably 1 out of the total number of pages between Human Action and Man, Economy, and State combined.
Yeah, if that. Now, I'm not a gambler. I don't know. Are you a gambler? Do you?
I am not.
Okay.
I've been, I have been somewhat on top of this whole Powerball thing, just because people around me are really into it.
It is interesting
And
from
so,
an economic point of view. Huh?
I do notice a lot of people have this notion of, oh, well, if the jackpot hits over 300 million or pick some number, 300 million is, I believe, what my mother uses as her guideline, then it's just too good not to enter into the agreement. And so, are the chances of winning absurdly low? Absolutely.
Of course.
Does anyone who enters this lotto market with one ticket seriously believe that they could win anything? No. So a lot of people point out the lottery as this thing that irrational users,
plenty
irrational
of that to go
people buy lotto tickets. And so that proves that man is not rational thinking man. Man is irrational. Man likes to buy lotto tickets. Man thinks that he could win $1.5 billion.
Is that what it is now?
Oh, well, someone won it, so it's reset now. But, so the notion of rational acting man has been used as a laughing point.
I see.
Across many schools of economic thought and many economics classes around the world. Yeah. And it's important to note that when Mises talks about rational man, he's really talking rational action. He's talking about purposeful action. Action that's done with the intent of accomplishing an end. Whether or not that means is appropriate to achieve that end, is buying a lotto ticket a great means for becoming rich? Probably not. That's still a rational action to Mises. It's purposeful.
Which is
for Mises, this is an important point that he brought in contention with Menger, was that the man standing in his front yard flapping his wings expecting to go to China is still acting rationally because he thinks he is achieving his end. Yeah. And the whole purpose of this is to distinguish action from reaction or instinct.
Right. It seems that, and by the way, I'm currently in a mainstream standard graduate program in economics, and I see this every day, the conflation of irrationality and entrepreneurial error. The two are not the same.
Well, and it seems to me a lot of times they try to bring in the field of psychology into economics.
Right. And these researchers that are employed at these universities really don't have a conception of the different categories of reality, right? They just sort of fumble about and deal with things as they come. So when somebody does something they don't understand, well, that's irrational, or they're guided by animal spirits, or some just outlandish reasoning, rather than serious inquiry.
Have you heard the joke about Keynes and Samuelson at a Chinese restaurant?
Go for it.
So they're watching the fish tank, and the fish are swimming all around in one direction.
So this is John Maynard Keynes and Paul Samuelson.
They're at a Chinese restaurant where, they have the tanks of the fish that you can watch, and they're swimming around in a circle, and all of a sudden they switch direction. And so Samuelson asks Keynes why'd they switch direction. And Keynes responds with, animal spirits, of course.
That's good. I actually have not heard that before. So human beings, so long as they act purposefully, are acting rationally. I mean, it's not just that it was Mises' conception. That's just how it is, right? It's by nature of the human condition. I mean, we are imperfect in our knowledge. We do not have exact, precise knowledge of the future. That means that entrepreneurial error, or what mainstream economists see as irrationality, is embedded into our DNA, quite literally.
Well, to put the whole idea of buying a lotto ticket in more mainstream terminology, let's use the word utility. People find utility or enjoyment in buying lotto tickets because they like to be part of the action, or they like dreaming about what if.
It does bring them some sort of what Mises called psychic profit, right? Even though they're not gaining in other ways that maybe a bureaucrat or an outside economist would approve of. Right.
Profit does not have to be monetary.
Right. There are other forms. Yeah, so I see this all the time. If you're a young person listening to this show, right, like me, and you go to college or you're in an economics class, heaven forbid, and apply this. When you hear this notion of irrationality, what's the professor talking about? Are they referring to actual irrational, reactive, non-purposeful behavior, or are they just talking about what is really rational, purposeful behavior carried out with a goal in mind that they don't approve of? I imagine it'll be the latter.
Well, professors are totally above the moralistic Puritan nature of dictating what you should do, right?
Yeah, it's all very scientific and technical now.
Well, it's math.
Yes. So goes the. Yeah. Well, mathematics and economics might require its own month of shows. So we won't get into it here. Did you have anything else, Tabor?
I'd just like to remind our listeners that we are on Facebook at facebook.com/Peace Anarchy Podcast, and to follow us on Twitter at Voice of Rothbard. Yes, that was available, and we took it.
And we will be on liberty.me shortly. We're working with the people there to get a presence up and running. So if you're a Liberty Me person, cool. We now are too.
And please check out our website at peaceanarchy.com. You'll find plenty of information and links to get you started.
All right, folks. This has been episode 3 of Peace and Anarchy. Bye for now.